All right, awesome. Thank you so much for being a guest on Dear Diaspora. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's get started by getting to know you just a little bit better. Where are you from and where did you grow up?
So I'm a Nigerian. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria in 1991. But I grew up all over Nigeria, really. From between 1991 to 2000, right before 9/11, I was in Lagos, where I did primary school. And then in 2000s, I oscillated between the Niger Delta, Warri, Nigeria, and the North, Nasarawa and Abuja, where I went to a Jesuit school called Loyola Jesuit College. Then I went off to university in 2008. I went to University of Waterloo in Canada. I spent 5 years there, at first studying and then ultimately building a bunch of startups before coming back to Nigeria in 2013.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. And when you went to school, did you know like you wanted to be an entrepreneur or was it something that just kind of sparked your interest as you went along?
It wasn't really as exotic a life career choice as it seems these days. I think my entire exposure to entrepreneurship before I got into university was through the Junior Achievement Program in my school. And to be quite honest, we mostly thought about the work we did as just like as a hack, short-term illicit gains. Because I went to a Jesuit school, a strict Jesuit boarding school. Provisions weren't allowed. We weren't allowed to have money. But through JA, we're able to money launder quite a bit of our, black market gains from selling contraband, snacks, and Valentine's presents for inflated prices on campus.
Wow.
Um, so that was my entire exposure to entrepreneurship. I was literally the junior high version of a dope dealer, but this time I wasn't selling drugs, just lots of snacks and fake roses and Valentine's gifts to dopey teenagers.
Oh my goodness. So you always had like that entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, even though you didn't know, what you'd want to do eventually in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I always did have a business streak. I grew up with my mother who used to sell iced fish from home. And I remember one of the times I actually, I think my earliest memory when I was like 7 was when my mother, you know how when visitors come to your house, they give you money. And usually your mom keeps it and you never see it again. So one of those days I had insisted on taking back my money. And my mom had said, hey, since you're taking back your money, you might as well go fend for yourself. So I take it. She was obviously joking, but I took my 20 naira. I went and bought some garden eggs and I tried to sell them. And then I just bought more garden eggs and ate all of them. So that was my I guess the African version of selling lemonade at a stand. My mom was particularly entrepreneurial. I definitely picked up some of the bug from her, but it wasn't something that we thought about entrepreneurship as more survival in my family. It was something to do while waiting for a job or while waiting for a big break, while when there's no other option. It wasn't necessarily like a life choice, a career life choice, the way we see it today. So it's great to see people evolve from survival entrepreneurship, as I call it, to career entrepreneurship as we see it today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so what did your parents think? So like, you were in college and maybe you're just finishing up or almost done and you're getting more into, co-founding businesses and stuff. How did they respond to that? Were they supportive?
Not initially. I think they saw it as a big distraction. I was fairly smart in school. I actually did my second year, my fourth year paper in my second year. And the goal was, I was going to go study law and I was going to be a big time competition lawyer, defending monopolies. And then I got this entrepreneurship thing, I met a friend of mine, Pierre Aries, who had gone to do, we had this thing called cooperative education at the University of Waterloo, where you had to do 2 years of work to be able to graduate from a 5-year program. And so my friend Pierre went over to Silicon Valley. I went to the UN. He came back from Silicon Valley, couldn't stop talking about it. We went to watch The Social Network. So I got the bug. But my parents always saw it as a distraction. And they weren't initially as supportive. And it took them a long time to really come around to the fact that this was what I was going to be doing in my life.
Wow. Wow. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And so I guess let's fast forward a bit to like building Andela, which is the startup I think you're maybe best known for.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was that like? Like, what were the early days like? And what
Yeah.
initially, I guess, gave you guys the idea to even get started?
So before Andela, I was running a lesser known startup called Fora, which had pivoted a number of times. But the last iteration before Andela was that it was building a marketplace for working professionals who wanted to earn long distance master's degrees. So like, like an MBA. That was actually our biggest market. A lot of bankers who wanted to get MBAs in finance. And so I was doing that, and I went to New York, I guess, to continue that work. And I had a friend, Jeremy Johnson, who had one of such programs. I wanted to get his perspective on this new business that looked like it was picking up. And we had a late dinner in Fresh and Co on 21st Street. I remember very clearly. And basically, he just tore up the idea. He was like, I don't think it will work. Folks are not incentivized to do this, blah, 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 blah. And then he started talking about stuff he wanted to do. Right? He was like, look, here's what I've realized he had been to Kenya. He was like, look, obviously, a high quality education costs a lot of money. And Africans generally can't afford to pay that kind of money. But what about a model where instead of having to pay that money, they could earn it? Because there's real value to a high quality education. And that just lit up a bunch of light bulbs in my head. And I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so I told him, hey, why don't I go try out this your idea and you back me to do it? Since you wouldn't back me to do this other idea I have, you back me to do this one. And he was like, sure, like, why don't we do that? So that was how literally we pivoted again, but this time as a side project to basically putting out this call out where I basically wrote, it's still on Twitter somewhere, no experience required. We'll pay you to learn how to build software. And we had about 700 applications.
Ooh.
So I knew we were on to something. So we sieved through the applications, did a bunch of interviews. I didn't have any money to go rent a space. So there was this lady who I worked at her office like 2-3 times a week. I was trying to get her to invest in Fora. Her name was Mrs. Adeoye, or her name right now is Mrs. Adeoye. And I tried to get her engaged by going to her office and so on. She wasn't, but she was willing to give us this space, right? Her boys' quarters to do the training program. So we went and we did a program there. It was a huge success. A lot of people dropped out because it was kind of like a elimination style training program. But a lot of people stayed through. And I think at the end, we had about 5 really good candidates. And then we put out tweets about their work and asked people to apply. And this time, 4,000 people applied.
Wow.
So it was crazy. But we also had a lot of interesting disappointments, right? Like at first, I had to fund the business a little bit by myself. And then Jeremy came through in a big way with some more money. And then when we did the first class, him and Christina actually came down to Nigeria to see the first class graduate. And they were really inspired by the work. And that was when they started to think seriously about getting engaged, which was amazing because I knew that I couldn't keep up with the capital requirements of building it. And I needed a CEO who knew how to handle that piece, and particularly how to get foreign clients, had the trust of the people who would be our clients. I mean, a Nigerian guy on the internet soliciting software companies to use Nigerian talents, not particularly the most comfortable image, unfortunately. So, they played a really critical role in making sure that we had the clientele. And then we just kept operating. We had quite a number of challenges still getting people on board. We had a number of challenges with space, right? Like we moved 6 times in the first year to
Oh my.
offices all over. It was crazy. But it was a fun time. It was a really fun experience building that brand from the ground up, changing the lives of young people. A lot of the young people who were part of that are now today, big men and women all over the world, which is amazing. So yeah, I mean, it was a blissful experience, I'll say.
Wow. Wow. I mean, yeah, what you guys were able to build is just incredible. And so there's been lots of talk, I guess, in like the startup or tech space or fundraising space about how, African-led startups are often, overlooked. How did you guys kind of navigate that, fundraising for your startup? And I guess what did you do differently, or was your experience similar to what other people are talking about?
Yeah, I mean, there were bits that were similar. I remember that we tried to raise money from, a popular impact fund, and they thought it wasn't a good idea. I know we had quite a number of funds who turned us down. I think I was most disappointed, to be honest, with the folks in country who turned us down. Like we went to local investors who had the means to back us and understood clearly the problem we're trying to solve. But I guess because they couldn't get some comfort around certain parts of the model, or they thought it wouldn't make money, they didn't back us, which was unfortunate. But I think we also had a lot of great support as well. People like CRE came in, people like Omedia came in. A lot of money came in from Jeremy personally. A lot of money came in from friends of Jeremy's personally. And that really helped. We also invested ourselves, put our own family's money to work in doing that. So that really, really helped. It was really kind of a pulled together thing. The one thing I would say we did differently was that we definitely, for those people who came in, they came in on mission. They came in on this idea that we were going to transform the unemployment landscape in Nigeria, take these incredibly talented young people, train them to become world-class software developers, and find them employment. And I think that was what inspired most people who put in their money to really kind of put in their money, was really an impact-focused fundraise, because we were telling an impact-focused story. It wasn't about how much money we were going to make, more about if we could find these young people and give them the kind of education that would allow them to be able to add value to society in that way.
Wow. Wow, thank you for that. And how did you guys, because I'm assuming, you guys changed over time. And I think even recently I saw, there's more of a shift or a focus on like senior or more,
Mm-hmm.
experienced developers. Like, how did you like figure out like, okay, this has to shift, this has to change? Like, was that ever difficult for you guys, or was it pretty straightforward?
It wasn't always straightforward, but it was something we did often enough. And I think if you even ask me in retrospect, not often enough at the same time. But definitely in relation to other companies, things were always changing. There are two kind of major transitions that happened in my time, because quite a number of the other changes didn't happen in my time. So I can't really speak to the logic behind them. But I understand kind of generally speaking how they came to those decisions. But I think the two particular changes that happened during my time was, when we started, we used to get jobs through Elance and Odesk, rather than actually, we didn't have a sales force. We didn't have money to get a sales force. So we just kind of got jobs through Elance and Odesk. That was our approach to getting jobs. So we'd go there. We had a team that was bidding for jobs on there. And then when they get jobs, we would then put it through our delivery process. The other one was moving from a per project pricing to per month pricing. We at the time we had been doing per project pricing, or quickly realizing that it wasn't serving the needs of the entrepreneur who wanted to grow with the team and didn't really appreciate, having this project style approach to building very critical infrastructure. So to accommodate those people, we started to offer a salary, basically like a fixed recurring cost, right? And basically that really helped us because it helps us make our revenue more predictable. So when we close a customer, we could count on them for a year rather than for 3 months. And that
Okay.
really, really helped us. So I think those were the two major changes that we made.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for expanding on that. And so, what would you say was your biggest lesson you learned building Andela?
Yeah, I learned a lot of things building Andela. I'll be honest. I learned so much from building Andela, but I'll pick on three lessons that I learned from Andela. I think the biggest one is mission is very, very key to building a great company. And Andela was a kind of company where we all lived in the same house. We all
Wow.
lived and breathed the company. Literally every waking hour was Andela's. And it showed, it cascaded down into the culture, where people were willing to do quite a bit to get that company off the ground. And we wouldn't be able to do much but for that reason, right? So that's number one. Number two is the team is super important, especially great teams. Like it takes a really, really great team to build something like an Andela. And we had the best of the best. We had Christina, who turned down a PhD at Harvard to come to us. We had Adam, who had just he just stepped down as speechwriter to Obama, Adam Franco. We had Jeremy Johnson, who had just IPO'd an education company on the
Wow.
Nasdaq.
Mhm.
We had Bryce, who was joining us from Pivotal Labs. We had Nad, who was joining us from Google. So we had a really, really stacked team, and that made a big difference in our outcomes, right? Without that stacked team, we wouldn't be able to do much. And then I'll say, finally, like I'll say, but my biggest lesson um, from Mandela is how important it is for you to, especially as you grow as a company, think very, very carefully about externalizing your impact, right? Um, one of the things that Andela did so well was Andela Learning Community, taking the learnings of the first four walls of Andela outside of Andela, and then leveraging that to build a new kind of pipeline for its own program. And that worked out really well as well, right? That was a big one for us. And so that has cemented my thoughts around how to think about building a truly impactful company. It's so important that you guys are all bought into the mission. It's so important that you guys are thinking, particularly strategically about your business, and that you have a team that can do that with you, a fantastic world-class team. And it's really, really important that you can externalize your impact. So Andela was responsible not just for building a great $650 million plus company, but for really waking up an entire ecosystem of developers that has continued to replicate itself till this day.
Absolutely, absolutely. Such impactful work. Definitely thankful for that. And um, it's just amazing to see, like, once someone has that Andela stamp,
Yeah.
that almost is like a, like a, it verifies that, this person is top notch, super talented, and, more than worthy of, future opportunities.
Mhm.
So it's really just really cool what you guys were able to do. And so I guess let's switch gears a little bit to building like an African future. I feel like that's
Mhm.
kind of what you're focused on now. And so let's start by just maybe discussing like what Africa's challenges are and what you think, like in your opinion, are some of the most pressing challenges the African continent is facing.
No, so what we do at the Fund for Africa's Future, which is the full name of the company, is leverage technology and innovation, partners, including innovators and investors, to basically create a platform for turning Africa's biggest challenges into global business opportunities. That's what we wake up to do every day. For us, we really see in the challenges amazing opportunities, right? When you think about very basic stuff like food, what opportunities do we have to ensure that we can increase the quantum of food we produce by leveraging technology so that we can have less people dying, so to speak, right? Of hunger, right? How do we solve the problem of unemployment on the continent? How do we solve the problem of schools on the continent? There are almost 12 million kids out of school, right, in this country. How do you solve that problem? So our theory has generally been that you leverage technology and innovation. Whether it's somebody who's leveraging, we have a company that uses certain kinds of machinery to crack palm nuts. Normally that was done manually, but now that can be done virtually using machinery to make clothing. I think about these things as the basics, right? How do you at scale create the basics for African life? Food, shelter, clothing, different kinds of opportunity. And as you do so, create jobs for tons of people. So I am particular about the technological innovation that solves these problems, because I think that's where, that's really kind of the real genesis, right, of all these things. So for me, I would say it is just so important to have a good grasp of Africa's most basic needs. A lot of these challenges are not challenges that can be solved, what I would say, arithmetically. They have to be solved in a very geometric way. So if you think about something like the mobile phone, personally, I see the mobile phone as the last great invention that has really impacted lives in Africa, because all of a sudden, it opened up commerce in a way that one would never have imagined before, right? Both in terms of communication with people. I remember there was a time when I was younger where if you wanted to go see your relatives, you actually had to show up, without knowing whether or not they were home. You want to talk to your brother who lived abroad, you had to go wait in somebody's home just to be able to speak to them. Now you can just call people how you like. So in terms of those type of stepwise technology functions that help you erase a problem and can scale because they're cheap, they're affordable for the masses, distribution has been thought of, they're real innovations because they solve critical problems for people. That's the kind of stuff that I'm super excited about. And it's usually the most basic.
Totally. And from the time you've spent in Nigeria, you said you've been there since 2013 now, or 2014?
Yeah. 2013.
2013. So are you seeing a lot of that type of entrepreneurship where folks are coming up with solutions to, some of our most, basic needs, or, some of our most...
I'm seeing these solutions. Unfortunately, a lot of them are not getting backed, which is where we come in. So, for example, there's a company we're super excited about that we backed a couple months back called Tambua Health. They're basically leveraging machine learning and sonic imaging to basically help detect more accurately and much faster than a stethoscope a respiratory disease. Wow. Without the expense of an MRI machine or an X-ray machine that can cost basically 5 primary healthcare centers, right? So with a very tiny device that's now being used by researchers at Stanford, at Harvard, you're able to detect respiratory diseases and compare the images against a backdrop database of about 100,000 respiratory sonic images. So basically using sound to create images of respiratory organs. And this stuff is working. It's working incredibly well. It's world-class technology. 14 patents have been filed on it. The founder is 25. He's not an old guy. Doesn't even have a master's, just his bachelor's. Amazing team, amazing team. And those type of innovations never really see the light of day because they are quote unquote African. But something like what Tambor is doing could really change the landscape of global healthcare, if you really think about it, right? It's solving an African problem, but it has the potential to be a global solution to many problems. So those are the kind of ideas that I find very inspiring to back as a venture capitalist.
Wow. That is, indeed inspiring. And so, I mean, over this past year, like I've been podcasting and, researching and learning a lot about, really cool companies starting up and being built. But I feel like outside of this little bubble that I'm in, people still continue to kind of overlook the African continent, its potential. Yeah. Like, why do you think that is?
I mean, I think I'm of two minds about it. On the one hand, I think some people are genuinely ignorant, right? And it's not their fault, People know what they know, and that's fine. The second thing, though, I think is more insidious, which is that I think a lot of people actually benefit from Africa remaining this hidden gem where, its innovations aren't globally accepted, it's considered backwater and underdeveloped. And so they perpetuate it while they mine it for ideas, right?
Wow.
I mean, I only say this, some of the most impressive founders I've ever met in the US, and I've had the benefit of meeting a lot of founders, will tell me that, first of all, many of them have had an experience in Africa, either by virtue of the Peace Corps or by virtue of, just going there as a consultant. Many founders, actually. And it's always something that's surprising to folks whenever I tell them or whenever I hear about it. But many world-class founders, for example, the founders of Lyft spent time in Zimbabwe. You might not know that.
No.
I was talking to one of the founders of Cul-de-Sac, and he spent time in Nigeria, Nigeria and South Africa. There's quite a number of founders who spent, Elon Musk spent time in South Africa. So there is actually a number of founders who've actually spent time in Africa, and so have become familiar with the problem space. And then they innovate these fantastic solutions, sometimes inspired by what they saw in Africa. Like the guys in Lyft are very, very open about the fact that they first saw ride sharing happen in Zim. You know what I mean? And then moved over to the US to build out the business.
That is so interesting. Wow, I've never heard of that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So if you really listen to like some of the origin stories of a lot of companies, you'd hear more about them, right? Just like, I had an experience in Africa that changed the way I thought about X, Y, and Z. And I think that, they're not doing it intentionally, but I think that, if more African founders were taking the reins and thinking of the problems that we have here as global problems, because they really are global problems, and we have more of a capacity to solve them at the appropriate cost basis, and with more resilience than other markets because of just how uncertain things are here. So I think that's a big reason. But I think ultimately, if it falls, whose responsibility is it to fix that? I think that's the most important question. And the answer to that, in my opinion, is Africans, particularly Africans in diaspora, right? Because not only are you familiar with these challenges, you also are familiar with the technology and innovation required to fix these problems. And you have the ability and the network to build these businesses. You know what I mean? So it's actually our diaspora and people in Africa are best positioned to actually produce fantastic solutions to these problems. So yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the tide is starting to turn. I think the more Africans start to fund African businesses, particularly at an earlier stage, the more of a fighting chance we have to build global businesses. And that's going to be extremely good for Africa over the long term.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow, yeah, I totally agree that, you know, us Africans in the diaspora, we are kind of uniquely positioned to, you know, leverage like our networks and, you know, privilege a lot of us have like here abroad, and then, you know, be able to work with folks on the ground and create really innovative solutions, because we are also, like you said, really intimately just familiar with like the landscape. It's so we have like the best of both worlds. And
Exactly.
so thank you for speaking to that a little bit. And so what's your advice to like young people, especially like for instance, I've been in the US like 15 years now, and I haven't lived on the continent for an extensive amount of time in 15
Mhm.
years. But then a lot of my peers are super interested in, you know, going back home, starting companies,
Yeah.
starting nonprofits. Like, what's your advice to us?
Yeah, I think, I mean, very much like you guys, I was also in Canada for 6 years, you know. And I think for those people who are looking to find ways to contribute, the best way is to connect with those already on the ground back home. Find ways to connect with them, find ways to support what they're doing, invest if you can. I mean, Future Africa Collective offers diaspora who are qualified accredited investors an opportunity to invest in breakout founders. If you can't invest, you can support in other ways by providing support and advice for founders back home. I would say, you know, that engagement is very critical, because even when you decide to come back, you want to be plugged into some sort of community that can help you. Um, but that only happens if you're also as generous as you're expecting people to be. And that means like when you had the opportunity, you were also contributing. While I was in Canada, I made it a point of duty to be in touch with a lot of leaders of the ecosystem, to support, to help when I could, to provide advice when I could. So I think it's important that more and more people in diaspora look to do that. Um, and then, you know, look for ways to get your feet wet, right? One quarter, now that we're all remote, you know, spending one quarter on the continent is not a bad idea. You know, you get a feel for the local environment, what problems are interesting to solve, and you know that can all be paid for by your company, right? Which is awesome. um, and
Absolutely.
Exactly, and I think the more of our diaspora bring capital, bring expertise to the table, forge a sense of community. You know, I think the closer we're going to get to this world that we describe, and at Future Africa, the way we put it is that the Africa we want is an African future where technology and innovation enables so much abundance that prosperity and purpose is within everyone's reach. That means everybody is able to make money by doing work that they love. So I think that's the world we all work for. And provided that we're very focused in this mission and we look for ways to raise each other up, I think we'll get there.
Wow, absolutely. Thank you for that. And could you tell us a bit more about how the African diaspora can get involved with the Future Collective? Are you able to share like how much you need to have to, you know, invest?
Sure. Sure. So if you're in the US specifically, if you're not in the US, you can invest, you can always invest. But because of your SEC, for US folks, you have to be an accredited investor. The good thing is they've expanded the definition of accredited investor, but prior to now, it meant that as an individual, you were earning $200,000 a year, and as a family or joint spouse, you were earning $300,000 a year. And then it also meant that, but now it also qualifies for, if you take an exam like a Series 7 exam or Series 64 exam, to be like a financial advisor, you also qualify to be an accredited investor.
Oh,
So that's the good thing. Now, if you're an accredited investor, you can go on future.africa/collective. And basically, what we do at the collective is that we give you an opportunity to lean on our 5 years of experience angel investing in some of the most exciting companies in Africa: 54 Gene, Tambua Health, Bamboo, Flutterwave, of course, Mandela, of course, Max, Laurie, Kobo. We basically invested in almost every success story out of Africa over the last 5 years.
wow.
We have an incredible track record, 174% IRR over the last 5 years.
Wow.
We've 9 times our assets. So we started with $1.5 million of our own money. Now it's $14.2 million. So we have a good track record. And so we have good taste, basically.
Yes.
And we're going to identify companies that are solving some of our biggest challenges and turning those challenges into global business opportunities, and present them to you as an investor every fortnight. And all you have to do to be able to receive these investment offers is pay $1,000 annual membership fee. And we present you with these options, and you can invest a minimum of $5,000 into each deal.
Oh, wow.
So pretty affordable way to angel invest. You don't have to worry about sourcing deals, struggling to get into deals, etc., etc. It's all managed by AngelList, so completely above board. You don't have to worry about my integrity here, even though I have it. AngelList manages everything. You wire your money to AngelList, you get your investment AngelList. Everything kind of works with AngelList. So yeah, I mean that's basically the core Future Africa Collective offering. We also have the rolling fund, so people want to get in on deals because with the collective, we can't bring deals to the collective unless they're raising above $100,000. But sometimes there are companies that are much earlier in their evolution, and people like to get in super early. There you would be relying completely on our judgment, though. We will fund about 20 of those companies every year with up to $50,000. And essentially you invest in the rolling fund to be able to do that. So those are kind of like the two vehicles that we leverage.
Very cool. Very cool. Wow. I mean, that's super inspiring. And yeah, I hope people, can look it up and, figure out ways they can get involved. And so my last question for you is, what excites you about Africa's future?
There's a lot. There's a lot, really. But I mean, I'm one of those people who really believes that demography is destiny. And if you look into the future, even just 20 years from now, in 2035, Africa is going to have more than half of the world's working population. And I think about when we've been given the opportunity to bring creativity to the table, to bring energy to the table, to display excellence because we've been given the right resources and orientation. We really, really bring it, right? And I think about that with the power of technology on a global scale. How much more impactful could we be as an entire race if we lived in a future where technology and innovation is making prosperity and purpose something that's accessible to every single person? How many more burner boys will we get? How many more Acons will we get? How many more talented developers will we get? How many more talented marketers like you will we get when we are allowed to bring our full selves to the table? There are a few of us who are privileged enough to be in the diaspora right today, but think about when there's 100,000 more of us, and we don't even have to be in the US to be able to contribute to the world. That excites me because technology really gives us the power to create value and capture it like we've never been able to do it before. I mean, Africa's biggest export to the world has always been its people. People talk about our raw materials and oil and all that, and that's okay. I mean, it's good. We've been blessed with all of that, but its people have built the globe in ways we can't imagine, right? That's what the legacy of slavery was that our people went and built the whole world and got nothing for it. Now with technology, when we can build the whole world and actually get something for it, I'm just excited to see what we do with that power.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, E. That was great. Yeah, definitely excited about Africa's future and really, really thankful for the work that you're doing with the Future Africa Fund and the Future Collective. And it's just all super inspiring to see. And I hope to see even more of it, in the future. So definitely appreciate your time.
Same here. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to folks.